Christ has risen. He has risen indeed. It's Easter Sunday. It's the day we celebrate. It's why we have worship on Sundays. It's because it's a mini Easter every single Sunday. There's something glorious and wonderful about the story we have. People are all around the world, whatever they believe, they look to Jesus as being a good teacher, a great philosopher, a great prophet, someone who shows them how we should be living life. But for us, for Christians, there's something special. There's an additional part. This is God. This is God who came for us. And we can make all the noise we want about sins and about forgiveness and about all the other stuff. None of it actually has anything to do with what's going on with Easter Sunday, or at least not the way a lot of people think it might. Jesus did not die because we're bad people. Jesus died because things had to change. He allowed himself, although he wasn't crazy about the idea, he allowed himself to go to death to stand up for what he believed. He's not alone in that. A lot of people around the world, that is the choice they've made. A lot of people throughout our history, that is the choice they've made. For those of us in North America who are in most times isolated from the pain and the reality of challenging a structure, mostly because it's built for us, especially if you're light complected like I am. The system is built for us. We don't even think of challenging it. But here was Jesus 2,000 years ago who taught us something different, who taught us that justice is not something you just talk about, it's something you live, it's something you see right through to the end. And Jesus did that for us to learn, for us to realize that come Easter morning, death hasn't got control. It's not the end. It's not even part of the story, part way rather of the story. The profound nature of the resurrection is something that we can always find something to talk about because it doesn't make sense. There's nothing in it logical. None of us have had the experience of what it's going to be like. We have imaginations. We certainly have what biblical writers assumed it was going to be like, but we don't have anything to go on. This is where faith comes into play. But faith is not something that you just kind of reach out blindly. We had some people ahead of us who showed us how we can treat this. As we turn back to the scriptures, we're looking at Matthew this year. Matthew is very firmly rooted in the Hebrew text. So everything, he always considered Jesus as fulfilling the promises, fulfilling the prophecies. So most of Matthew's narrative lines up with Isaiah and the other minor prophets. He told us through his lessons, through his references, whoever this author was of Matthew's, he told us how all of this worked and how it had been promised for a while, and how now finally with Jesus the promise was lived. How extraordinary that was, because the promise itself. The promise of new life, the promise of renewal, the promise of a community, of endless needs being met, that's a complete reversal, upturn from the world that we know and from the world that was known 2,000 years ago. And this is something we have to really kind of accept, because I don't know how easy it is to actually get our heads around that everything in Jesus' story was completely the inverse of what society assumed it was going to be. He was born the king of all, the language we use, the great leader, in humble means. He was lauded by the highest, most rich people in the world in a humble, tiny house. He taught people to love and take care of each other when vulnerability to being hurt was on everyone's mind. He told people about the freedom, the life that we could all have living in a world that was controlled by an occupying nation. They had no power. They had no political self-determination. They had an entire religious elite that was kowtowing to Rome because they knew that if they don't keep nice with Rome, Rome would roll over them. And they were right. 70 and again in 135 CE, all the Hebrew people were kicked out of Judea, Jerusalem, if they hadn't been kicked out by 170. So it's not that the Roman authorities were wrong, it's that they couldn't hear what Jesus was saying. And then we get to Easter morning, and the very first people are women. It wasn't that they were the only ones that could take care of the body. Men did, they could, but women were there. And we have in Matthew the telling of the angel to these women. Jesus is alive. He's risen. It's incredible. It's true. Pay attention. And women who at that time in history were not considered reliable witnesses, some might say not much has changed, but they were socially not reliable witnesses, became the witnesses that God chose. That the people who were marginalized, the people who were dismissed, the people who were overlooked by the establishment, the people who were not getting the benefit of cozying up to the people in charge, were always the ones Jesus came to first. And these women on Easter morning were no different. He came to them at that point. This is the only gospel where people recognize Jesus right away, because Jesus as a mystery was not part of Matthew's messaging. He wanted to make sure everybody understood that this was expected. This is something we could count on, that God was something we could count on, that God being with us was something we always knew to be true. And Jesus tells the women, go and tell the rest of them, I'll meet you in Galilee. Very different story from Luke or John, which is what we often hear, but completely rooted in the conviction that this is right. This is closing the loop. This is what is expected to have happen. Jesus went through something to shock us into the reality that what we were doing, how we were living, was not good enough. Every time something like that happens in the world, we have this moment collectively as a multi-nation experience, realizing that we've gone too far. Jesus understood that. He stepped up. On Sunday of Resurrection, we were allowed to realize that no matter how bad things are, it's not the last word. No matter how much pain is in the world, it's not going to stay that way. No matter how much destruction we see around us, how many problems we see that we can't possibly conquer on our own, it's not going to matter. Because Jesus promised that the hard stuff was not the last stuff. So rejoice this Easter morning. Christ is alive. We can keep on going. We can keep on growing. We can keep doing the things that he asked us to do with the assurance that we're doing the right thing. We are part of God's people, moving forward and making a difference. This is our day to celebrate. We will pick up the work again later, but right now celebrate the fact that every bit of social convention, every bit of limitation that has been placed on us, every bit of social hierarchy that has dismissed any of us, in Christ, none of that registers. The entire world is flipped upside down. What we didn't believe could happen becomes normal because we believe in a Christ who did it first.